Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I was about to walk out the door and I saw a tweet from Alex, I guess it's Hugel. Thank you for tweeting me, Alex. Thank you for being a subscriber. And give me 1 second, I'm checking my volume. I saw that tweet and I sat back down in my chair and I had to respond. When Martin Luther King came out against the Vietnam War, his famous speech, his barn burner of a speech, he did this in you can call it rebel head or enemy territory, meaning Martin Luther King know that he could be scrubbed off the map. He's in a political system where he is looked at as being inferior, where he's been dragged into the police station on numerous occasions, interrogated or brutalized, tortured by those cops in those different areas. And yet, even with this political wedge, African American trying to ingratiate himself to the Democratic Party, despite the president that's allowing him this wedge, LBJ, being one of the advocates of that war, Martin Luther King came out against it. The reason he came out against it is because he kind of made this point of saying the same boot that is being applied to those people over there is the same boot that's being used here. And I have a hard time of saying and advocating for rights of the people here while at the same token ignoring what we ourselves are doing somewhere else. Not just that, it is impossible to spend as much money and resources on military while at the same token trying to have this kind of great society. You can't have it both ways. Martin Luther King was right in that. I think from a moral and humanitarian standpoint, he was right. Nevertheless, he was attacked for that position. You had people who came out and went after him saying, what is this Negro doing talking about stuff across the world? That Negro need to mind his own affairs. Why is he talking about this stuff? Martin Luther King is going to make it bad for us. We ingratiated ourselves with LBJ. He's going to fuck it up for us. Why is Martin Luther King talking about this? Those people existed. Some of those people were African Americans, and they attacked Martin Luther King on this. He was right, though. I mean, ultimately, the anti-war stance was right. His stance that you can't spend all that money abroad and spend that money and resources here to make sure that people have the things that they need was right. I look at that because it makes me realize that just because people do the right thing don't necessarily mean that the society itself are going to give them accolades for doing the right thing. Sometimes you see that stuff in historical context, but in a moment, it's missed. There are a few people who are in the political landscape, but one of the people who I like the most, or one of the high people on that list, is Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard has been a unfailingly anti-war, and has been one of the main people to call out the U.S. government on the BS that they're coming across. Taking matters, saying what you guys were doing over there was illegal. You're firing off missiles illegally. Mattis admitting it's complicated. It's not complicated, it's illegal. You may use the euphemism complicated, but I'm going to use the euphemism illegal because by a legal and definition, by a political standard, it's illegal. If we're a country of laws, well, you've just broken one. She's been unfailing on this. Tulsi Gabbard was attacked by Hillary Clinton, even during the campaign. That came up in the WikiLeaks thing, where Hillary Clinton wrote this nasty letter to her because she didn't just fall down and bend the knee and give her support. So you can understand, I love me some Tulsi Gabbard also. So I don't necessarily like it when one of the unions, supposed unions that are supposed to be representing teachers in Hawaii, comes out and gives their support to somebody else. Now, this is a political context, and anybody can support anybody else. And I don't live in Hawaii, so maybe they have a point. Maybe there's something that Tulsi Gabbard is not doing that I am completely unaware of, where they need to pull their support from Tulsi Gabbard in this because Tulsi Gabbard is not living up to their interests. But no, from a standpoint of what Tulsi Gabbard represents in the political space, the world is good. So why? Why would this group, why would this teacher union take away their support for Tulsi Gabbard? They didn't like her anti-war stance. They didn't like the fact that she essentially wasn't on board for this kind of interventionist wars. I shit you not. This is in the Huffington Post. Tulsi Gabbard's Syria views calls her supportive of the teachers union. When Tulsi Gabbard came out looking for evidence. They didn't like that. And in fact, listen to the Orwellian way they word this. I think after seeing Gabbard's comments, continued lack of fighting for human and civil rights, that this was, for our members across the state, enough was enough. Gabbard has attracted significant criticism for her positions on Syria, particularly Assad. In January, she met with Assad without informing leaders of her party. I wasn't aware she had to do this. And she dismissed the opposition, his opposition, including rebels backed by the United States as terrorists. She sat down with Assad in an attempt to end the civil war. Because they're terrorists! That's exactly what they are! The United States, it's not even in question anymore. The United States was giving weapons and arms. The guy was on Fox News talking about how those weapons went to ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The reports that came back, studies, were showing that the weapons that ISIS had went beyond the capacity that they would get those things from the battlefield. We were arming terrorists. Own it. Own it. And the idea that she calls a spade should be the thing that you support her for. That you should get out and say, God damn it, when everybody else was lying to me, Tulsi was at least trying to tell me the truth. But no, this teacher union doesn't like that. It doesn't like that at all. Let's keep going. More recently, she was one of the few public officials who refused to immediately blame the Syrian government for horrific chemical attack that kills dozens of people, including children. Hey, who did the chemical attack the last time around in 2017? Answer me that. Give me that answer. And before you say Assad, I'm going to say that Mattis himself didn't know who did that attack because Mattis himself said he didn't know who did the attack. The United States struck without even knowing whether or not Assad did it. They didn't care whether or not Assad did it. They had a political agenda that they wanted to push. Now, if you're in politics, and you know this because you're there and you heard Mattis say this, and the next chemical attack comes up, you know that the terrorists themselves have access to chemical weapons. You know it makes no logical sense for Bashar al-Assad to do this. And the only argument that you ever get is, well, he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. He's just a bad guy. So yeah, he'll use chemical weapons, even when those chemical weapons go against his own political interests and against his own objectives, because he's a bad guy. And him being a bad guy apparently matters more to Assad than keeping himself in that seat, despite clinging to that seat like grim death for the past 4 or 5 years. The stance that you should be proud of her for, that you should support her for, that you should be out there saying, yes, she's telling us the goddamn truth. And yes, she's trying to prevent us from going into a war. In your Orwellian warped way, you end up saying that her trying to prevent a war and trying to prevent the United States from using this boot to bash the head in of somebody else that it doesn't particularly like, knowing full well that the people who are going to be at the end of that boot are just regular people. What about Libya? What do you think happened in Libya? Explain to me what took place in Libya. What do you think happened in Iraq? What do you think happened in Afghanistan? I'm asking you this because whether or not you believe the United States boot and its force did some way of doing this kind of beautiful flowers and ponies in these countries, or whether or not destroyed these countries, we've committed horrors. And you're looking at the horrors that we've committed, and this woman is out there saying, wait a minute, let's not commit a horror again. And you're saying that her being a stalwart for anti-war, for her pushing the government, making the point that what the government is doing is illegal. It's not a defense of Assad. It's trying to prevent us from killing a lot of people, which is what we've been doing in the past in these other countries. Maybe you shouldn't be head of that organization if you don't know what the hell you're talking about. I invited this woman to come onto the show, or this person to come onto the show, to have a conversation about this, because I'm curious about this. This is not so much I just disagree with her from the standpoint of what's taking place in regards to what Tulsi is doing for Hawaii, or what she's doing on the domestic front. If your issue here is that the woman is anti-war and that she wants the United States government held accountable when it's doing things that's not necessarily telling the truth, or when it's doing things that's illegal, then yeah, I want to have a conversation about that, because you're fundamentally wrong. This comes across as if you don't know what you're talking about, because I'm making the point that you probably don't know what you're talking about. If you supported Tulsi Gabbard for all of these years, her stance in Syria should have been one of the things that made you proud to support her, not one of the things that made you pull your support. This is nonsense. I invited this person on to the show. I sent them an email before I did this video. Right here. She was just one of 3 representatives and the only Democrat who refused to condemn dictator Bashar al-Assad for genocidal chemical attack on his own people. After the attack, Gabbard traveled to Syria to meet the genocidal dictator without the permission from the whole of Congress. She doesn't need their permission. Her trip was funded by a group with ties to with Assad supporters. Yeah, I'm inviting this person to come on to the show. What's the person's name? HSTA President. Right here. Honolulu Civic Beat HSTA President Corey Ronsley. It became a core issue. All right, Corey, come on this show and have a conversation with me about that core issue. I suspect you would lose this conversation because you don't know what the hell you're talking about. The thing that she did here, when she was pushing them, when she went over to see what was taking place with her own eyes, that's what a person is supposed to do when you're in the Senate. You're supposed to want to know what's taking place. When she came back and she chose Jake Tapper that we're supporting terrorists, that's what you're supposed to do. She wasn't taking this random Democratic line that Obama was supporting terrorists or they were supporting moderates. Nonsense. They weren't moderates. They were terrorists. You're fundamentally wrong. And if this is one of those core issues that you feel strongly about, fair enough. I welcome you onto the show to have a conversation about that particular core issue. I suspect strongly that they would never take me up on that offer. But the offer exists. This is something they should be proud of. This is not something that they should back away from. Tulsi Gabbard is fucking awesome on this. Of all the things you can pick a bitch about Tulsi Gabbard, this is not one of them. So, I want to end this here. Don't want this one to be too long. Alright, guys. I'll see you in a few. I didn't get a chance to go to leave yet, so I am leaving now. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, everyone.